Well, thousands gathered on the National Mall today in Washington, D.C. to remember Dr. Martin Luther King's call for racial equality 50 years ago today. The first black president stood in that same spot where Dr. King addressed a crowd of 250,000 back in 1963.
I have a dream today.
Because they marched, city councils changed, and state legislatures changed, and Congress changed, and yes, eventually the White House changed.
And today, tens of thousands joined together in the rain for speeches, music, and dance on the National Mall. Hundreds commemorated the 1963 March for Jobs and Freedom with a march through the streets of Washington. As President Clinton said, the march and speech a half-century ago changed America. He was there as well.
And it also changed the life of a local man. George Hocker Jr. was 24 years old when he watched Dr. King deliver that speech, and Sally Showman sat down with him today.
For the first time in my life, I felt I wasn't alone.
I still have a dream.
I felt I was part of something much bigger than me.
It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream.
George Hocker Jr. was so close he could see Dr. King's expression.
And I was probably within, I believe, 75 to 100 yards by my estimate.
Even before the speech began, it was a memorable day.
And I remember that I stepped on a white man's foot, and he said, "Excuse me," for having his foot under my foot before I could say, "Excuse me for stepping on your foot." That's the kind of peacefulness that was there.
The first 14 years of Hocker's life were in a segregated world. But that day, 50 years ago, blacks and whites, men and women stood side by side, an estimated 250,000 of them.
But I had never seen anything like this.
He remembers vividly that moment, about 11 minutes into the speech, that Dr. King went off script and said those 4 historic words.
I have a dream.
He began to talk extemporaneously, having put down his notes.
My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
It became a defining moment in my life.
The speech led Hocker into a life committed to public service, most recently here at Portland City Hall.
Actually, that was.
Hocker worked for the federal government for 34 years. He served as a minister in his church, and now he works in Commissioner Nick Fish's office. He says all of this can be traced back to that day in 1963.
It amazes me how powerful the message is, how relevant it is to today, 50 years later. And it's disappointing in that we still have so much work to do. But I am an eternal optimist, and I do believe that we will continue to make positive changes.
Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Sally Showman, KOIN 6 News.